Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. This next panel is on marketing, media, and PR. I'm going to real quick give a little story on myself, one of the issues I had with marketing. So for all my clients that are in the cannabis space, I generally tell them to not put hemp or cannabis or marijuana in their name. But I had decided that I was going to put it in my name. I put my law firm name is Mr. Cannabis Law, and the reason I did that is because I wanted to deal with all the issues that my clients deal with censorship, whether it's from a banking perspective, social media perspective, marketing perspective. Having that in your name creates all sorts of different issues. So setting up banking was a challenge for me, professional liability insurance, and even my Facebook page was taken down after just 1 week of being up. Ultimately, I knew I would be able to overcome it, and I did, and I'm better for doing it. But it's very important, and it's a big challenge in this industry to properly market yourself and to do the right PR stuff and media stuff. So we got a panel of experts. I'm just going to introduce them by name, and I'll let them talk a little bit about themselves when they get started. We got Jared Mirsky, who's the CEO of Wick and Mortar. We got David Tran, who's the co-founder and former chief branding officer of Dope Media. We got Javier Hasse, who's an editor and book author. And we have Samantha, who's a journalist for the Miami Herald. So I'll let you guys take it from here.
Hey, what's up? How's everybody doing this morning? Good, excellent. It's great to be here in Miami. It's great to see some really great faces, and super excited to be right here next to some serious experts, some serious people who have done some incredible things. And you know, a short thing, I didn't know Javier was a rapper, but he is a rapper, and he'll show you later on how great he is. But this gentleman right here has contributed to over 4,900 different articles in cannabis, and probably some of the biggest magazines, namely Dope Magazine, where you know he contributed, also High Times, Sports Magazine. And you know, it's great to have a gentleman like this who is the bridge to the mainstream, and the way he tells his stories and the way he you know, sets us up for success, you know, in the eye of the public is pretty amazing. So
is anyone recording this?
No, I just want to say something nice about everybody. And you know, Samantha here, we just met today, but you know, I know how important it is to see the Miami Herald that's been here since 1910. And when big mainstream media like that starts to talk about cannabis, you know things are changing, the conversation is changing, and I think it's going to be great to have your perspective today. Jared Mirsky, I've known him for close to 20 years when we were in the bar industry, and I think we were in a garage doing one of my first menus 20 years ago, and here we are today. You know, our paths cross, and he has really built himself an incredible business, but I don't think there are better people that built a personal brand, and for him, he stands behind his brand, and I think that's what marketing is all about. How are we building the brand, and at some point, when we're ready, how do we get it out there? So that's what we want to talk about. And myself, I started Dope Magazine back in 2011. Saw some very interesting things through medical into the recreational world, and how marketing has changed. You know, for me, you know, I'm pretty sure I still have flyers from my nightclubs, you know, with the UV ray that's still sitting in the landfill somewhere. But, you know, marketing has changed, and, you know, I recently was able to sell it to High Times last year. Again, the publication that taught me how to build community and to love cannabis. So it's interesting now, and you know, just working on Fairchild, which is a event platform. So here we have some experts, and I just wanted to talk about the different media. There's earned media, there's paid media, and then there's also owned media. And I wanted to kind of go through that, and it's really awesome because everybody has a different perspective on these subjects. So maybe Javier, you talk about maybe some strategies, you know, for the earned media. I mean, 4,900 different contributions to different magazines. What do you recommend?
Well, thank you. I think it's important to start with a little bit of a distinction between paid and earned media. Paid media means you pay for it. So it's basically an ad, whether it's in the form of an article or in the form of an ad. What that means is you control the messaging. You control exactly what it says, how it is said, how it is presented. But people can tell by now. We're not stupid as readers anymore. We're not, oblivious to the fact that you can buy presence in, say, a magazine, a website, a newspaper. Now, here's an interesting tidbit. In cannabis, that is almost impossible unless it's for specific, trade publications or industry magazines or cannabis magazines. Other than that, you cannot actually go and place an ad on most magazines. You cannot buy an article on the New York Times. I mean, even if you try and buy, last year we saw, for instance, Acreage Holdings, no, actually it was this year in February, try and run an ad, a PSA on cannabis during the Super Bowl, and CBS rejected it on the basis that it was cannabis. You cannot place an ad on Facebook, you cannot place an ad on Instagram. So
do you see that slowly change? Do you see that changing? How far do you think
slowly? Yeah, and I think Jared will be definitely more qualified to talk on that, speak on that. My point was just that is paid media. Earned media is kind of the tool for cannabis companies, activists, advocates right now. And I think probably, don't want to put words in your mouth, I think you will agree. It's kind of the tool for cannabis, like again, businesses, activists, etc., to gain visibility. So how do you do that? And I think that is something that we probably should circle back in a little bit.
Yeah, and Samantha, from a journalist point of view, what stories are being told? What are on the top of the mind down here in an emerging state like this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Javier. Earned media, seems to be the most valuable for brands and for companies to get into mainstream media. The Miami Herald is a really good example of mainstream media down here in South Florida. And I think that people here, want to hear these stories, especially with, kind of up and coming pushes for, adult use cannabis. There are, ballot initiatives that are, coming up for the 2020 election, and things like that are being covered by the media because they're newsworthy. And so I think there's a balance there with brand recognition, but also just getting news out for people who need it, voters, patients, things like that.
And it's really interesting how, like, the emerging states, the ones that are, still, I come here to Florida and I can't just light up a joint. I'm very much in a bubble over on the West Coast where, the stories are a lot different. The things that are more important here. Here, there's a lot more education that needs to be caught up. Jared, what are your thoughts on you're one person, like this guy. He doesn't have a PR firm, he doesn't do that, but he has been able to build himself a lot of earned media to build his brand. And when you're able to get the earned media, and then you're able to put that on to paid media and really then have conversions on marketing. So Jared, how do you do it?
When so to kind of give you a brief background, 10 years ago I started the very first cannabis-focused branding and marketing firm in the world. And that was what gave me the platform to speak here today. It's essentially helping create what the standard is as far as things regarding compliance, packaging regulations. How do you differentiate between what the LCB or any liquor control board deems as a cartoon character versus an actual logo, right? And helping them suss out what the hell does that actually mean. But getting to the question, I would say if I was to give anybody any advice as far as how to start building some of your own PR, what I did was just looked at all of the articles that pertain primarily to branding and marketing, and some that were also touching on cannabis. And so those that were really talking about, really anything in and around cannabis or branding and marketing, as a journalist, I felt compelled to scroll to the bottom of their article, find their name, look up their Twitter or their Instagram or their Facebook, and just send them a message. Let them know that I'm alive, that I'm here, that there's an expert out there that's willing to talk to them. A lot of people are afraid to do that. I know Javier probably hates it when people do that to him. But there are people that honestly don't mind it and are certainly, looking for people out there to help usher them, usher new information into these, digital publications. So, there's a way, but you have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to write about it. You have to be willing to talk about it and start creating content. But
so a little add-on here. Please feel free to reach out. Just be mindful of how you do it, right? Jared is claiming to be the first because he is. Today I got an email this morning that really pissed me off, and it's an email that says, California's largest cannabis producer, blah, 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 blah. And I respond, I appreciate the pitch, but data does not back your claims that you are the largest cannabis producer, to which they respond, I just checked with our CEO. He says we're on our way to being one of the top 3. And it's like, that is not the same. You're not the Amazon of weed. You're not the Elon Musk of CBD, like the other one, the other day. There's no need for puns. Stop it with all of those references and stuff like that. So there's a way to approach a person. It's not, yo, what up? Hello, Javier, I've been following your work. I think this could be definitely, in your ballpark. There's a way to earn media, and I think that is what that was the initial question. Earned media is all about getting the person who will cover you interested in your story.
And you have to build a good reputation in the industry. You have to do right. You have to do business right. You're not around very long if you don't do that right. So in a sense, you're building your reputation, and that's really how you get a lot of earned media, because you're building that credibility. But that is earned. It's not given. It's not paid for. And, that's...
Your mic's off.
It's off.
There we go. Completely agree. And remember that if you are, I should preface this, one of the reasons why I wanted to become a writer, and I first have to thank Javier also, he's the one that introduced me to Entrepreneur. So I write for Forbes, Entrepreneur, High Times, MG, and a number of other publications. And Javier gave me a really nice introduction to the CEO of Entrepreneur, so thank you again for that. He also featured me in a book he wrote. What was the name of it again? Why don't you tell everybody?
Start Your Own Cannabis Business.
That's Javier Hasse's book.
Yeah, he wrote for Entrepreneur. I have a nice feature in that, so thank you again for that. But remember that your brand is the promise that you make to your customer, right? And when building a personal brand, much like I did for myself, I was a terrible writer. I didn't even really like writing, honestly. But I got good at it, and I fell in love with it because I knew that by becoming a thought leader in an emerging market, or an industry for that matter, it would position me with the ability to communicate to my potential clients on a different level, not from a sales perspective, but from a consulting perspective. And so with that, it gave me the ability to have a much different type of conversation with them, where they were wanting to spend every possible minute they could with me on the phone. They wanted me to talk most of the time, which never happens in sales, right? But nonetheless, I wanted to make sure that, I stayed true to my mission, and that was to change the perception of cannabis on a global level, one brand at a time.
Kind of flip it a little bit. I want to ask both of you, what are your pot peeves, if you will? Like, as I mentioned mine, don't pitch me the Elon Musk of CBD. You are not. Like, that is an unwarranted comparison. It's like, yeah, I'm into space, whatever. That doesn't make you Elon Musk. So what are your top, say, 2 pot peeves, you as a journalist and you as a publisher?
Well, I'm lucky because I just built a really incredible team. I didn't write one article in the magazine, but
pitches.
But to me, it's just like, I think it's by statistical number. I always listen to in LinkedIn. I have a conversation with everyone. You never really know where the gems are. So really participating, to me, and sometimes you're gonna have to go through some BS and some other those things. But again, proof of concept is happening more than ever. At the beginning, everyone could say, I'm a consultant. I walk in, I write a RACI chart, and you know what? I'm going to pay you $10,000, a month to do that. But nowadays, there certainly are people that have to prove their worth, prove what their value is, because there are other people that are doing the same thing. So building your reputation, your name, to your point earlier, you making the recommendation there, knowing people, your network is absolutely everything. You know what I mean? And I think the more and more you can continue to build that ecosystem, you become very valuable to anyone you come in touch with. So I definitely don't know if I answered that. I kind of went the other way around.
Well, yeah, you went the the positive route. You can go any of those.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best pitches I get are from people who know who they're pitching to, and I think it's really important to understand who you're pitching to, so the person who's receiving those emails doesn't feel like you're receiving one of 1 million emails. I mean, I cover cannabis in Florida. I'm not going to take seriously a pitch for a company that doesn't do business in Florida or is even, as far as the West Coast, and I get a lot of those emails. But I do listen. There's real people on the other end of that email, and I think that's also important to consider. Yeah, my pot peeve is people pitching things that are unrelated to me or unrelated to things I cover. I cover policy and politics surrounding cannabis, not necessarily new product announcements and things like that. So I think it's good to keep in mind who you're pitching to, personalize that, and reach out. I mean, I'm always willing to get a cup of coffee with someone who's based in South Florida, or if I'm traveling around the state, before I get a cold email.
Nice. Well, let's move into the.
Well, wait. What about my pot peeve?
No, we're ready. I'll move you to a different. Do you have a pot peeve? Do you want to? Yes. You must.
No, I mean, I smoke so much weed. I don't really get. I have so much patience now, so I think I'm good. Yeah.
There you go, folks. Cannabis doing the patient work.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, let's move into the paid media. Once you have a brand, it's time to get it out to the masses. I know marketing has changed so much in the last 10 years. For us, we started Dope Magazine and print magazine, right? It's still new to our industry, but it's been a traditional method that's been around for a long time. And a lot of people say that it's, dying, right? But, I think different, medians and platforms serve different purposes. So want to kind of just talk about, for your clients, Jared, what are you recommending, once you've built their brand for them? Let's talk about some of the people that are doing it well and maybe some things that people should avoid.
Well, I think first and foremost, we should first talk a little bit about the foundation. I think one of my biggest actually pot peeves, if you could call it that, would probably be when a company comes to us looking to get into marketing but has a very weak foundation. There's no brand story. There is no differentiating value proposition. I like to use the example of the Dollar Shave Club because I think it kind of resonates with a lot of people in the sense that there were these really large groups. There was Schick, Gillette, and Braun, and they all had this, bold, masculine, and futuristic aesthetic approach, as where, the Dollar Shave Club, very simple name, says what it means. They when they went through the brand building process, they identified their tone of voice as witty, comical, and funny. Also bold, but bold in a different way than their competitors. And so by defining who they were prior to jumping into their logo and their name and really any of their marketing, they first understood, how am I going to differentiate myself? How am I going to ensure that the 3 differentiating value propositions my company has don't get lost in the smoke, right? Which were cheaper razors, right? Dollar Shave Club. That's pretty freaking cheap. Then you've got a subscription model, and then you've got the fact that they were building their products in the U.S. That's providing jobs for citizens, which is now social responsibility, an additional layer you can build within your brand. But what they did, again, was created a personality that led them to a much more tangible vision as far as how they wanted to approach their marketing. And so when they came out with their commercial that was in fact funny, witty, and comical, also bold, it gave them the leg up because it ultimately helped them differentiate themselves from their competitors. And it's important to do that because when you look at brands in the market today, they look pretty damn similar. It's just now that you're starting to see, at least in the Pacific Northwest, brands really start to differentiate themselves. But then what do you do when aesthetic is no longer enough, right? How do you market those differentiators? And I think that's the question that Dave is really asking. And how do you take a brand, and bring it beyond, again, just aesthetic. And so I think it really depends on whether or not you're a retailer, a cultivator, or an ancillary business. So if you're...
So it's not all a one-size-fit-all.
It's not,
you're
absolutely not.
You're saying this works for this works for this.
Well, right. For cultivators, we're not going to focus on search engine optimization. No one's looking for your website unless you're also providing a delivery service. But then you have to ask yourself, are you selling clothing on your website? So we may want to drive traffic there through social media to create more brand awareness. However, you have to be realistic about what you expect to achieve from that. Is it more foot traffic in the retail stores nearby? But again, there's loopholes in marketing on Facebook. Just as an example, if you were a retail store and you were looking to open up in the next 6 months, what we would do as an agency, thinking about creative and marketing in tandem, is come up with a name that presents you as perhaps a digital publication, right? And make your website look like a digital publication until your doors are open. Because essentially what we do is just turn you into, we just be writing blogs for you. We then post them on Facebook. We can boost those posts because you're not technically a dispensary. You're not promoting the sale of cannabis. And because you can geo-target the articles you post and you can boost in those specific areas, you can actually start to drive in a potential customer base from that local area. And then when you become a retailer, you flip that switch, you won't be able to advertise anymore. But guess what? You have 100,000 followers on Facebook perhaps that are within a 2-mile radius of your dispensary. So there are things that you can do. There are ways that you can market. Again, it's to Dave's point. It's complex and it's convoluted, and it does take specialists, to help navigate some of this, marketing space. So, yeah.
I mean, Javier, you've, again, written for over 4,900. What, in print advertising, the traditional advertising medians, where do you see that evolving? Where do you see that changing? Where do you see that place in? You probably can, Samantha probably can contribute to that too. What does these traditional platforms, does it have a place in cannabis? Where is it going?
I'll let you take this one first.
Okay.
I think you're more aware.
I mean, I think that I could speak to mainstream media and traditional media like the Miami Herald. At the Miami Herald, I'm pretty much the one person that covers cannabis, and we're kind of experimenting. It does get really good readership, but we see other places like Politico and the Boston Globe create marijuana verticals, and I think that seeing those things kind of pop up and start to hire more journalists to write about these things, it's a symbiotic relationship, right, between traditional media and marketing companies to continue the production of content. So I think as we're seeing more cannabis legislation come to light, more people talking about it in the mainstream, we'll see more coverage in mainstream media. It just kind of works that way.
Yeah, some of these mainstream media outlets are definitely becoming more cannabis friendly. We do catch a PSA or ad for cannabis on the Wall Street Journal here and there. But if you go to Forbes, if you go to Entrepreneur Magazine, if you go to Benzinga, which is the vertical I manage, we have like 35 people working on cannabis events and media initiatives, on a daily basis, and they are definitely more welcoming. You go to the main page of Forbes or Entrepreneur, and if you have been consuming cannabis content, you will probably get a targeted ad on there. Not quite yet on the New York Times, not quite yet on CNN, but it's slowly moving in that direction. And of course, it really helps, as Jared said, to craft a message that is definitely more friendly. I wanted to share your story a little bit because it's pretty funny that you would pick the dollar-shaped club out of all examples. Jared's original company, can I tell us?
Yeah, please.
Jared's original company was called Online Marijuana Design .com, and people would just Google it and come up with him. It's like there was like a vast offering at the time, so I just found it funny that you would that you would pick the Dollar Shave Club, because it's kind of the same concept.
Yeah, it is.
And it's also interesting how you went through that rebranding process. Now that cannabis has definitely become a mainstream issue to fit a more mainstream corporate mold, because you can definitely not be placing an ad that goes online marijuanadesign.com on the New York Times today. It just looks like an infomercial from TV.
I don't even know how I got banking at Wells Fargo with that name.
I don't know either. I got
really
kicked out, so you got lucky.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good
Thank you,
segue.
Joe, by the
That's
way.
a good segue into, to me, the own media, like the the websites, the podcasts, things that you own, and in order to do that really well, you must have great content. And you talk about having your own story correct, but you're also, you're creating an avatar for what your company is trying to say. Let's talk about that, because different mediums here are really interesting, and kind of hear, from you guys about, how you maintain that, how that it's important in your company and what you guys do every day.
So I'm going to say one quick thing and pass it off. People nowadays, I think, and this is a very personal opinion, really enjoy a lot more content than an ad. They know they're being sold something, and it's kind of boring. I've seen every ad. I don't care how creative you get. It's like, I know you're selling me something. Sometimes it's so effective I can't tell. But again, to the point of content, it's in many occasions more productive to allocate your marketing and advertising dollars toward strong, engaging content instead of an ad showing your product. You show a lifestyle sometimes. You show a position of advocacy. You show, where you stand on issues.
But don't expect anyone to polish a turd or put lipstick on a pig, because I tell you, it's going to be very, very difficult to turn poop into gold. That said, looking at, when you talked about the, online marijuana design, mind you, this was 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago now. There were no real ancillary businesses that existed other than High Times, us, and perhaps some hydroponic shops, right? There weren't a lot of ancillary businesses. And so it was important that we chose a name that stood out and helped us identify with our target market exactly what the hell it was that we did. But more importantly, Google's algorithm ranked domains really well then based on search terms, right? So to Javier's point, the industry changed drastically. And even though we were continuing to grow, I also felt like we were growing a lot slower given the market opportunity. And so I felt like it was time for us to rebrand, especially because we had green in our identity. We had part of a pot leaf in our logo, and we had marijuana in our name. The three biggest things we were telling all of our clients to avoid, we were doing ourselves. So it didn't seem fair that we could get away with it and our clients couldn't, despite how long we'd been in the industry. So we took it upon ourselves to rebrand ourselves to Wick and Mortar, which we felt was certainly much more suited. So if you get a chance to check out our YouTube channel, we filmed a bit of a documentary as we went through the process to go through and rename the agency. But what Wick and Mortar means is, when you think of brick and mortar, you think of something that's built from the ground up. It's the foundation, brick by brick, building blocks. So the mortar is the glue that holds the bricks together, and Wick is ethereal. It's also a part of hemp, and it's a nod to the cannabis industry. That said, we rebranded, and we've seen tremendous success from that. The level of clients that we get, and the ask, and the level of respect that we get, with the traditional side of the agency world, has been drastically different, and it's just been a lot easier for us. So I guess my point is that bad design costs more than good design, and it can make your lives a lot easier when your story is far much simpler to understand. And so, it's great to get to sit up here with these three amazing people who have also done a fairly great job of telling stories within the cannabis industry. Dave, is there anything else that you wanted me to add on to that?
No, that's wonderful. You guys want to add anything before I maybe turn it over and see if anybody has any questions in the audience? I think we're past our 30-minute allotment here.
Are we? I thought we had an hour.
But yeah. Add any questions from the audience? Do you mind?
Not at all.
Love to give you guys a little opportunity. Yes, please. I will walk over here. Make this interactive here. My
question is, for companies that are interested in going into the market, do you recommend that they start preparing the market now, even though they're not getting licensed?
That's a great question. So, are you going to be vertically integrated, or yes? So, despite whether or not you're vertically integrated or not, I think it's smart for any company that's creating a product to jump into branding and marketing sooner than later, simply because it doesn't require a license to create brand awareness. Also, if you wanted to take that identity and license that brand likeness or IP in other states with other cultivators, you can start doing that as well. In fact, I often recommend my clients, before thinking about getting into the building of infrastructure, to just build a brand, build an identity, and take it to market and start building relationships with these licensed growers, start generating revenue, and then start building your infrastructure, because it'll give you much more capital to invest in creating brand awareness in a much shorter period of time on a national level. So just some food for thought.
To add on to that, to me, as you build your business plan, the marketing should be an integral part of what's the demographics. Is there a market there? Do I have a niche that stands out? And part of the process of building the business plan is building out that marketing plan already. What does that look like? From who's involved in it, who's leading that, who's in the right positions. These are all questions that you ask in the early stages before you spend a dime on raising money, and that's kind of part of the process, I would say.
Yeah, I'd also recommend checking out headset.io for anyone looking at transactional data that they can run comps against. So I highly recommend that. They're a great company.
And coming up with an identity, marketing, and a brand ethos will definitely also help you build out your business. You will not be building the same kind of cultivation facility if you're going to brand yourself as an organic producer, if you're going to brand yourself as a high THC producer, if you're an ancillary business, if you're a dispensary aimed at lower shelf products and selling a lot, if you're a high-end dispensary, right? So definitely crafting an identity will help you in the build out of your business as a whole.
Yes, sir.
Sure, and I think it really depends on what your story is and how that translates into the messaging. For some, it's a matter of bringing in social responsibility. For as an example, we had this client called Rebel Spirit, and they were originally called Uncle Mark's Farm, but we renamed them to Rebel Spirit because we felt like it was much more conducive to the market they were, focused on. But more importantly, their Uncle Mark was a grower in Eastern Washington who grew medical marijuana for patients and was arrested by the federal government. he was sent to prison. In prison, got sick and passed away. And so they wanted to create a brand to commemorate him when it became legal in their state of Oregon. And so as part of what we created in terms of the messaging as a way to honor and commemorate Uncle Mark was we implemented social responsibility by taking a portion of the proceeds from each product purchased and putting it towards exonerating people in prison for cannabis crimes. But it also, moving away from Uncle Mark's Farm and into Rebel Spirit, it gave us a platform to encourage those that have relatives, friends, or family members in prison or in jail suffering from cannabis crimes to provide us with their own stories, thus generating more content for us, creating additional marketing support. So to kind of to kind of bring back to what you're saying, it really just depends on, your story. And again, for brands like Candescent, when I helped work with, Rick and Adrian on their brand strategy, coming up with charge, connect, create, and all of the total 5. Ultimately, we wanted to create experiences that made it easier for them to fit strain specificity within. There is no global packaging language for the cannabis industry, much like there is with, coffee, wine, milk, and other products I'm sure you're very familiar with that all share a very, united, packaging language. And so for the cannabis industry, it's a little bit more fun for us because we fall under 3 sectors: medical, recreational, and wellness. And so it gives us a lot more room to be creative with how we create our messaging. To your point, that experience and that customer journey, and how do we, create products that are, niche focused.
So, and I think everybody wants, like to me, companies more and more want feedback because they want to improve their process. So to me, there are ways to do that. There are platforms. There are, to me, loyalty programs. There are ways to get back. Then there's conversions of such as, engaging back and sending emails out, talking about what am I doing right and wrong. I've owned so many nightclubs in my life, and it's just like now there's Yelp will tell you exactly how you're doing, and most of the time it's not great. But but the truth is we all want feedback because that's our competitive edge. Everybody's margins are very thin. At some point, to be competitive, there are all these small things you need to do. And to you, hospitality, having that feedback so you can change one little thing could be very valuable in the difference.
I would love to know what you think. Do you care about customer experience? How does it weigh on your coverage at all? Does it at all?
I mean, to an extent, I find a lot of sources and patients for my stories in Facebook groups that I have joined. It's a lot of kind of patient advocacy groups and things, and sometimes they do talk about their customer experience. People share similar experiences for certain dispensaries, and I don't think it forms my coverage at all, but it is a really good kind of look into some of these brands and helps me kind of understand what it's like to go into those stores. I'm not a medical patient. I don't know what it's like to be served at an MMTC here in Florida, so a medical marijuana treatment center. So yeah, I think that customer experience definitely, kind of shapes my idea of some of these brands when I approach them for stories that I'm writing and things like that.
Hello, I'm Nick Frankel with Media Gel. We focus similarly on the advertising side, and I come from the media world, and so it's audience and messaging. Javier, you talked a little bit earlier about if you're reading cannabis content, you're probably going to be identified and then served an ad based on that. So I'd like to know, are there any companies that are doing that really well that you guys have worked with? And then if you had a company, more for Jared, if you had a client that had a good brand and they came and they said, we've got 15 grand, where would you start?
I'm going to say something a little unexpected here, but I think PR people are awesome, and and they are very useful for brands. So when you ask me which brands are doing it right, 95% of the times in my experience at least, it's who you're hiring to do it for you. That makes a big difference. When trying to get coverage, the right kind of coverage, in the right kind of tone, in the right outlets, by the right people, that requires, as you well know, because that is what you do, a very specific knowledge and skill set.
You're
And very
saying you pay for
specific
what you get.
connections. Exactly. So honestly, if you ask me like which brands are doing better at, you know, landing media and doing it in the right way and getting the attention of the media, my response would be, well, there's PR firms doing that. Like, it's not, I will rarely look at a specific brand out of I will, but it's like, you know, I am considerably more prone to it if Rosie, who is not here today, emails me and goes, or someone at her PR firm, Matthew, emails me and goes like, hey, Javi, we've talked about this company in the past. They were doing this and that. It's like, oh, perfect. You know, I trust your criteria in a certain sense, or you know how to work with me. It's definitely, that is a big factor in all of this. I don't like to single out specific companies, just conflicts of interest. Any other thoughts?
Sure, we'll probably take one or...
Yeah, 5 more minutes.
Oh, I was going to answer. Well, I'm sorry. I was going to answer his your one question. What would I do with $15,000? Sorry, I apologize. I was just trying to think of that. I would say, first of all, it depends on whether or not you're looking to market yourself on a national or global level. Because $15,000 may not be enough, and I might say, sorry, I can't work with you. That's just not enough to hit you, to get you where you need to be. But assuming that 15K was the recommended amount that we said, okay, this is what we would probably, I would spend, $5 to $7 grand a month on PR. Then I would put the rest of it into, a digital marketing strategy that was specific to the brand. Because if it's a cultivator, it's going to be a completely different approach than perhaps a strategy I might take with a retailer, as where foot traffic is more important to them than perhaps brand awareness, which comes as kind of secondary anyways. But, remarketing if you can, pay-per-click advertising, depending on the quality, because there are a lot of really shitty companies out there doing pay-per-click advertising that have very little results. MediaGel is not one of them.
Don't find them on LinkedIn. Just if someone reaches out on LinkedIn saying we do the best SEO services, like don't. No, it's not true.
We're answering your question at the same point here. What's working, what's not working. So that was your question too. And I think that's it. And I think to me, you kind of spoke to building a campaign, right? Because if you're just thinking about from a money point of view, then you're thinking about the wrong way. What is my milestone for this campaign?
Dave, I got a question for you then.
Yeah.
For her, for you, and for her. Because, and this is, I've worked with Dave. I was art director at Dope once, many moons ago. And, when my company was called Online Marijuana Design, we did a lot of the ad administration for Dope Magazine. And that was fucking nightmare. No offense, not because of anything with Dope. It was just because 10 years ago, people weren't bringing the most, I'd say 2014.
We didn't have any of the technology. I mean, we're building all these systems ourselves.
So my question for you is, what can you tell everyone if they're looking to advertise in a magazine, how to get the best bang for their buck? Because print, it's not just print that you're getting when you're paying an advertiser. You're getting, the opportunity of having your, digital presence as well, feature on their digital publication site, or social media posts. But what are some of the ways that people can get?
Well, the ROI to me in print advertising is a lot in the relationship of the company, right? The company is putting a lot of resources into building a resource that people actually pick up and read, and that's important, and that important engagement. So really just working with the expert that's on the other line, because they have a lot of resources too. So to me, I never sold an ad, I really sold a relationship. I sold that, you know what I mean? When you're investing in me, this is what I invest in. Plus at the same time too, print just has a different emotional attachment, and if you have a brand that and cannabis is still very emotional, if you can attach it to that, there's a lot more time being spent on it. And to me, we're really documenting history, with print. It's not going to be around for very long, so enjoy it while it's there. And if you're one of the companies that were building a legacy in, you know, our industry, you will be known and you will have been a part of that history when, you know, you can actually open a book instead of scroll through things. Because, you know, again, impressions and 360 approaches everything. One thing doesn't just work, and I say that to everyone. Everyone should take a 360 approach to what you're doing, and that might include events, and that's the new company I started, was focusing just on events, because I realized that here's an outside of the box way to engage in your consumers, whoever it is. And to me, everything, business is based on one relationship. You could come here, meet one person, and make everything worth it. And that's the key, but you have to participate, and you have to have that agenda when you come in here, is to meet that one person that is going to change the trajectory of your life today. And I've had a lot of these moments, and that's why I'm saying it's not because I'm smart, it's because I've gotten into the right rooms, shook the right hands, and we've had the right conversation at the right time. And so I'm pretty sure I didn't answer that, did I? I just kind of just lost it first time.
I think it was good.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think we've taken up a lot of time. I really appreciate this incredible panel, and feels like summer camp because it feels like I know everybody. And Wick and Mortar right over there, they have all of the handles, more handles than you can handle over there.
Follow me at jared.mirsky and send me a DM if you'd like a creative brief. I'd be happy to send our first step in the branding process to you so that you can understand what types of questions to ask yourself.
Yeah, and Samantha, where would they?
Yeah, you could pitch me. It's sgross at miamiherald.com. My Twitter is Samantha J. Gross. I take DMs there also.
Sounds good. And I mean, I wouldn't know where to. He flies in and out from Argentina, by the way, you guys, and he can still do this incredible work. So how do they get a hold of you?
You can find me on social media or on Google or anything. Name and surname, Javier Hasse. You can see it there. And please do follow us on benzinga.com/cannabis. We put out about 150 articles on cannabis, hemp, and CBD every week. We host 4 massive events every year. I'm not going to pitch it here, but please do follow our news. I promise all we do is try to deliver a great service to the audience and the public, and honestly invest a lot into it.
And you do. So, and I'm David Tran, and thank you very much for
give it up for David.
Time.